So I'm here in my workshop in Portugal where I make windows, and today I need to laminate some pine windows and need to cut the circles from some oak windows. I need to sand and varnish a sapele window, porthole window, and I need to mark out all the joinery in a life-size format for a sapele casement window. So that's what I've got to do today. It's 4 different windows, 4 commissions that I'm working on at the moment this month. Yeah, today's main challenge was with the oak window. It threw up a lot of new issues. I was trying a new technique and yeah, almost went completely wrong. We'll go into that a little bit more later. So I start out by removing all the clamps from the pine window, and I put those clamps on so that the polygon stays completely flat. So all the layers as they join to each other, so they're not out of line, and that saves a lot of time later on. I then use the belt sander to flatten the polygons so that they're ready for glue up. So if there's small gaps between the laminations, it's going to make a joint that isn't strong, and the window could delaminate and break in future. So as long as they're flat, they can get a really good glue surface. I then clean them both with a vacuum cleaner and with a wet rag to make sure they're completely dust free, ready for glue up. So when I'm making my windows, they're always made out of multiple laminations, so it takes a lot longer to work this way. If you were to just make a 8cm polygon and cut the circle from that, it would be basically 4 times quicker to get to that polygon stage at least. However, they would just be butt joints holding the whole window together. So when you're using laminations, it's essentially making like a mortise and tenon style joint between each polygon, or each part of the polygon. So it's really strong and it's really resistant to twisting. So all the pine window parts are done. It's 10 o'clock and time to move on to the oak window. So I start out by removing all the clamps from the oak window. The frame is 2 polygons laminated together, and the beading is just a single layer which will be held together by biscuit joints eventually. I'm making 2 portholes, so there's going to be 2 parts with 2 polygons and 2 parts with 1. I'm using a new technique to cut these oak windows. If I'm cutting a pine window, I set up the router and the compass point, and I'll just cut all the way through until the circle is completely released. With a pine window that's okay because it's softwood, the router can cut quite easily through it, but with oak it vibrates the router, it really feels like it's damaging the router, makes horrible noise. So what I've decided to do this time is just cut a circular groove in the same technique as I would usually do, but only going down like 6 or 7 millimeters. So I cut all of the circles out of all of the pieces, and then I take the polygons off the table. Then I use a jigsaw to release the circles from the polygons. But yeah, this is where the main issue came up today. So I'm using a high quality jigsaw which I bought specifically for this job, or for these windows, thinking that the blade wouldn't bend out like this. It's kind of the main issue with jigsaws, is that when you're going around corners, the blade likes to bend out. But yeah, it turns out even with a high quality jigsaw, if you use a cheaper blade, you still get that same issue, and it really happened badly this time. So I had some Festool blades. They work fine, but they're not long enough to go through the windows. They only go through 3 centimeters. My windows are 4 centimeters. So yeah, the saw was overheating when I was trying to cut through 4 centimeters. So I used a cheaper blade, and it just went way out. So I was lucky. I was cutting a spare piece when I noticed this was happening, and it literally cut like way into the spare piece. It was really bad. I haven't seen it that bad before. So yeah, I was lucky that I saw that this was happening before trying to cut out the main windows. Obviously I don't want to make mistakes with them, or they can be delayed. I also tried going in with the Festool blade from underneath, so it was cutting just over 3 centimeters, and it worked much better. I could see where I was cutting, it didn't seem to be bending the blade, but holding the saw upside down, having to push into the piece, holding the whole weight of the saw, was just too much. But yeah, in the end I managed to get all the circles out just about, so it looked like the blade had cut into one of my windows, and that was a problem. But I wasn't going to know how much it had cut into the window until I had flush trimmed, which was the next step. Flush trimming, that's the next bit, and that's where the next issue came up. So this is all a new process for me, so obviously it's where issues come up anytime I do something new. The flush trim bit that I bought, it was good quality, but it had 2 bearings and the screw on the end. So I'm trying to flush trim along here, but the bearing is hitting the table, so I've got to figure out a way to hold this piece in midair in order to cut it. So I make a jig as I'm working, but yeah, it's kind of a big risk. I'm kind of make it as I'm going, and if this window falls out, it could be damaged. I might have to start again, or I could drop the router onto my own foot or legs. Yeah, I could do some real damage basically, so it was kind of a high risk thing. But luckily the jig holds together, and I managed to flush trim all the circles nicely. So there was that piece earlier which I mentioned, which I didn't know if it had cut through to the frame or not from the jigsaw, and it turns out it had. But as I was looking at it, there was only one half of the frame had actually cut through with the saw. So luckily I was going to be cutting a recess out of one half of the frame. So on the part where I overcut, I can cut the recess if I'm careful, so actually the mistake will no longer be visible. So next I have to get on with the sapele porthole. So I've made 2 coats of varnish on this window so far, it's looking really nice, and the next step is to sand it back to make it smooth and give it the next varnish a key, and then do the next 2 coats of varnish. So I sanded it back, it's looking nice, but unfortunately, yeah, my workshop isn't actually weatherproof. So you can see here there's gaps above the walls, and the entrance also isn't shut. So yeah, the wind can come through here, and because there's dust in my workshop, I wasn't able to do the varnishing. If I try and do the varnishing now, I run the risk of dust being blown into the wet varnish, and I would have to start the whole varnishing process again. So I decided against that, put the sapele window away for another day, and start with the joinery markups. So on to the final part of the day, getting all the joinery marked out. So this style of window is actually really high pressure, so I don't have any spare parts for these windows as I make them. So mistakes can cost a lot of time, having to go back, do all the new laminations, new milling. So it's important that I make this list perfect, so that tomorrow when I go to the workshop, I don't have to think about anything technical. All I have to do is just look at the list and make the cuts. So now I need to think, and so tomorrow I can just do. So I make all the measurements, it takes about an hour, but yeah, it's done. But despite all my measurements being good, I still managed to make a major mistake as soon as I start cutting the next day, which meant I had to go home, make new pieces and start again the following day. But that's for next time. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. If I do another day in the life video, I've already recorded it, but it will be doing the joinery for this sapele window, which I was just marking out now, with all the mistakes included. So until next time, thanks for watching, please subscribe.